Bueno, pues buenas tardes a todas y a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. Or good morning if you're following us from a different time zone. This is the next session of this doctoral seminar, chose the 5th European Disability Forum, United in Diversity, the Impact of the European Union on the Lives of Persons with Disabilities. Now I want to introduce you to another expert of the jury, Anna MILOŠEVIĆ, a member of Yuste Euro-Ibero-American Alumni Network and researcher at the University of Leuven in Belgium and Italy. She has just published a book on the policy of memory, or the Europeization of the memory policies in the Western Balkans, victims and memories after terror, with a critical analysis on the effectiveness of memorialization. She's working on also on transnational justice and the theory of change that examines the global trajectories of change, sometimes contradictory after a conflict. So she has, you might think, a different profile from the ones we are dealing with here today, but she has a very consolidated experience in the field of these doctoral seminars because she's also a member of the Alumni Network and also a researcher and a grantee of this the 5th European Award. She worked in this topic, and she's also dubbed a monument hunter because she looks after the monuments with inconvenient significance. So Anna, welcome back. It's a pleasure to have you here as a member of the jury and an expert, and she will be introducing also, she's introducing Brigitte.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Miguel, for this very long and detailed presentation of my scientific opus. But as Miguel said, I have dealt with many, many topics, but they can be summarized maybe in one sentence. I also deal with inclusivity. So I always try to, in my scientific work, to understand why some narratives, issues, discourses are being marginalized, and whether we can achieve this kind of inclusivity. And so I think this pretty much ties with what we are discussing today. Very briefly, I want to introduce Brigitte, who is going to present her brilliant work, PhD research. And may I remind you that she is at the first year of PhD studies. Brigitte is, well, first I'm going to present Brigitte, and then I'm going to tell you what she's going to talk about. So Brigitte is a Peruvian psychologist and also graduate of Erasmus Mundus Master, where she obtained a fellowship to work on these specific topics in Europe. She has academic training in Spain and Portugal, and her career is pretty much international, and she worked on social inclusion, organizational development, diversity, equity, and also on inclusion initiatives. So this year, as I said, she began her PhD, focusing on disability and attitudinal change through immersive technologies. Her work aims to generate applied knowledge that enhances workspace participation for historically excluded groups. This being said, in different words, I want to say a couple of words about what Brigitte is actually going to talk about today. So she's going to present her PhD plan of activities, her theoretical, methodological framework that she plans on using for the next 3 or 4 years. But basically, she wants to focus on whether this kind of new technologies, these immersive experiences, such as those offered by the virtual reality, can have some kind of a measurable impact on attitudes towards people with disabilities, especially in the workplace. Her presentation, and she's going to tell us in a moment a lot more on this, actually deals with prejudice. And she, being a psychologist, she's in a different position than maybe the rest of us to give us some palpable input on how can we actually deal with these structural barriers towards prejudice, and how can we maybe contribute to the attitudes change and empathy. I look forward to your presentation. Brigitte, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Buenas tardes con todos.
So good afternoon, and thank you, Yuste Foundation and Anna MILOŠEVIĆ, for your introduction. I am very happy and honored to be presenting you my PhD thesis, because I am my first year, so I'm very happy to be here today. I think this is going to be very helpful for my PhD. I come from the Barcelona University, but I am from Peru. My name is Welch Hidalgo Soriano, and this project today is entitled From Prejudice to Empathy Towards People with Disabilities, Virtual Reality to Transform Organizational Cultures. So this is what I will be talking about for the next 45 minutes. So first, let's talk about the European context. These are relevant data. For you today, 24% of the population of the European Union older than 16, has some form of disability. That means 107 million people, or 1 out of 4 adults in the in the EU, has a disability. So why don't think that is a non-relevant number? That is not a small number. More data. As you can see, this is the map of the European Union with the percentage of people with disabilities. Look at these figures, which are prominent. The country of the European Union with most people with disabilities is Latvia, 41.2%, then Finland, almost 35%, and Bulgaria, almost 13%. Spain ranks in the middle, around 20%. So these numbers tell us that even if all those countries are part of the same union, you can see several social, political differences that can classify types of disabilities. That's why the numbers are so different. Another important number up to 2024 in all countries of the European Union, more women than men have a disability. 26% of women have a disability, and 21.5% of men have a disability. This is relevant, and this is maybe going to help me in the coming years to understand the intersectionality of gender and disability. What are the challenges experienced by people with disability in the EU? 1 out of 5 people are jobless. 1 out of 5 people drops out of school too early, versus people without disabilities. Around 28 or 29% of people with disability drop out of school. It is important that we take this into account, because this thesis is for the employment aspect. So it is important for us to understand this if we are to integrate people in the labor markets. And then 1 out of 3 people are at risk of exclusion or poverty or social exclusion. What about employment, disability, and risk of poverty? According to the Eurostat statistics, 9.7% of people with disability that do have a job are at risk of poverty, versus 8% people without a disability that do have a job. So even if people with disability sometimes do have a job, they are also at higher risk of poverty. And that is where my question and the importance of this study lies. Because if this is happening, why is this taking place? How is the society addressing the problems of people with disability? This is the goal of the study. I want to assess the effect of virtual reality when it comes to assessing the attitude towards people with disability in the labor market and to promote changes of behavior. These are the specific objectives. We want to do a systematic review according to the PRISMA principles on immersive technologies, empathy, and behavioral change towards disability. The second one is to assess the effect of the interventions of virtual reality in the labor behavior towards disability and to analyze the explanatory mechanisms. And then we want to psychometrically validate a measuring instrument of the attitudes towards disability in the labor market. This is the theoretical framework. Let's define the term disability, but first, let's take a look at the history. Now we use the term people with disabilities, but that hasn't been always used. In the ancient times and the Middle Ages, disability was seen as an anomaly, an abnormality, or an inferiority, or a punishment. And so it justified practices such as exclusion or abandonment. Then in the 19th and the 20th centuries, we found the medical and assistance model, and we used different terms such as gripped or retarded or disabled. It's something, it revolves around the idea of help or assistance. And then after the 70s, the 1970s, we see the advent of the social model. Disability is seen as the result of the social barriers and not just an individual condition. And then in 2006, the UN Convention consolidated the term people with disabilities and the approach based on human rights, autonomy, and inclusion. And as we have seen in previous presentations, there is a debate around using different terms of people, for instance, with functional diversity, that seek to highlight the notion of diversity and to avoid using negative connotations. So let's now move on to the definition of people with disabilities. Who are those people? According to the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities of the UN from 2006, those people are people with some disabilities, such as people with physical, sensory, intellectual, or mental deficiencies that, when interacting with environment barriers, can see the full participation and the effective participation in the society limited on an equal foot. These are the types of disabilities. I am focusing on 4 types, as you could see in the UN definition: physical, sensory, intellectual, and mental disabilities. Physical disability means a limitation or difficulties in their mobility or their motor functions that can impair them in how they move or how they perform physical activities. Sensory disability has to do with alterations or impairments in one or more senses, basically sight or hearing, that can have an impact in their interaction with the environment. Intellectual disability means a difficulty in the functioning, in the intellectual and adaptive functioning that affect how they learn, how they make decisions, and how they live independently. Mental disabilities are impairments in the psychological or behavioral functioning that impact the social and work adaptation. All these types of disabilities are important because in the instrument that I intend to use in my PhD dissertation, we can assess attitudes towards each type of disability. However, we need to emphasize that these conditions are not excluding people from living or leading an active life, from participating in the society in a productive and effective way, and from living or from exercising the right to live an autonomous and full life. So let me define the attitudes and why they are important. An attitude. What is it? This is a very common word, and I would try to define it even if it's difficult. It's an assessment of an object, concept, or behavior in a scale from positive to negative, from good to bad, or from nice to not nice, or whether you like it or not. And they revolve around three types of elements: cognitive, what we think, affective, what we feel, or behavioral, what we do. And all these three components influence the cognitions, the emotional responses, and the behavioral trends of people towards individuals with disabilities. Why and how? One of the reasons behind the labor difficulties of this group of people could be attributed to attitudes by the workmates, the bosses, and the human resources leaders towards people with disability in the work environment. Because if they show some kind of negative attitude towards this type of population, prejudices and stereotypes appear that go against the quality of life of people with disabilities. So they have more difficulties in getting a job, landing a job. Sometimes they cannot land the job because of these perceived attitudes. If, however, positive attitudes arise, they contribute to raising awareness and to promote more inclusive environments within organizations and society as a whole. Let's look at an example so that we can see it better, so that we can shed some light. There is a psychological mechanism in a hiring process. Let's imagine this situation. There is a company that wants to hire someone for a specific administrative position. And one of the candidates is a person with a visual impairment that applies for this process. So, what is the psychological mechanism behind this? So we have the three components of the attitude: cognitive, affective, and behavioral components of the attitude. And let's look at a negative attitude, a possible negative attitude. The person conducting the hiring process or the interviews might think, as a prejudice, people with a visual impairment cannot read or handle data, they're not productive, they can make expensive mistakes. That is also affecting the affective component of the attitude: fear, restlessness, and the behavior. they reject the candidate with that visual impairment, which is a form of discrimination. If, however, the attitude was positive, let's imagine a different person conducting the interview who thinks, well, this candidate can use accessible tools and be as efficient as any other. The affective component would make them think empathy or trust or confidence, and the behavior, the action, would mean that this manager would hire that person and adaptadapt the work environment by, buying a screen reader or by adapting the software. That means talent retention. That means inclusion. That is the difference between a negative attitude or a positive attitude in hiring or including people with disability in the labor market. So what is the role of psychology? Because we do see these negative attitudes, but what can we do about them? There are some classic interventions that have been studied by psychology through time. For instance, the intergroup contact that uses the cognitive and the affective component. And there is some evidence that this is effective. We also have something called the perspective-taking intervention. Make someone think with the perspective of a people with disability. This is the affective component, and you can see the evidence. For instance, you also have education or awareness raising that use the cognitive component with some key evidence that it changes some labor myths, or even the cognitive behavioral therapy that uses both cognitive and behavioral components, and there is evidence that it reduces discrimination. So psychology has done the fair share of work in trying to reduce this. But now I will like to move on to talking about virtual reality and how it can help us reduce the negative attitudes. This is the opportunity we have to explore. So let's see how. So this is a technology that enables an interaction with an environment created by a computer. So in this case, it is used to reduce the negative attitudes and to increase the empathy. The virtual reality wants to simulate in an immersive way special contexts or scenarios or situations, so it can be used as a promising tool for the development of empathy and sensitiveness towards people with disability, both in the work environment or in the educational context. Let's see a comparison and why it could be an opportunity. Classic interventions have some limitations. They can be slow. The impact they have can be slow. And they are always around imagination. People have to imagine the interventions. I can start an intervention with you, but you will imagine different scenarios. It's non-scalable, and the contact is limited or can be limited. On the other hand, the immersive virtual reality is immediate because one person wears the goggles and can live an experience for 5 or 10 minutes, and you can live it firsthand. You can experience it firsthand instead of having to construct your own experience. This is a universal experience, but because what you can see through the goggles can be seen by others. So that is the positive side of the virtual reality. That's why it is conceived or seen as a possible tool for this study. Let's see some examples of experiences that have already used virtual reality by other authors. We have, for instance, Zhang and others that have used VR in adults for social inclusion. The result is that there have been some moderate increases in attitudes and awareness. The second author is Welch. They did a study with museum workers to validate scenarios of virtual reality to create awareness in museums. The result was a notable increase in terms of awareness towards the existing barriers in a museum. The third author used these on workers. They wanted to test virtual reality to increase the amount of empathy towards the disease of autism at work. The outcome was a significant improvement in terms of empathy and labor acceptance. And then the third author used VR in adults to increase the levels of empathy towards people with disability, and there was a significant increase. So, several studies support this change of attitude after using the virtual reality goggles. But they are not, for a majority, being applied in the work environment. Let's look at this example led by Fundación ADECO in Barcelona that has developed immersive experiences to show how a person with disability has to overcome obstacles in the work environment. Through this experience, they showed 4 types of disabilities. People wearing the goggles wear them, and it's like they had the disability themselves, be it physical, sensory, visual disability in this case, intellectual disability, and so on and so forth. So they can experience by themselves how living with that condition would be and working with that condition would be. And so I want to show you 2 videos. And can you please help me play them?
Fundación ADECO. En Fundación
In Fundación ADECO, we work for inclusion. Hello, my name is Marta. I come from Fundación ADECO. In Fundación ADECO, we work on the social and labor insertion of people who have a harder time finding a job. And we are going to share this activity, different realities. The interpreter apologizes, but the background noise doesn't make possible to interpret the video.
Laboral. Para ello nos apoyamos en las gafas de realidad virtual, como podéis ver, en la que vais a poder vivir una experiencia inmersiva, 360 grados. Tenemos 4 vídeos que son 4 discapacidades diferentes y son todo historias reales de nuestros beneficiarios que nos han trasladado.
Gracias, ese fue el primer video.
Thank you. This was the first video. Here we can see how people can experience these virtual reality glasses. As you could see, these are real stories. And based on that, specific cases were created for the videos that are seen through the glasses. In the second video, we will have a few seconds of experience of what you can see when you use the glasses.
Como comenté, solo eran unos segundos.
As I was mentioning, it was just a few seconds. I can elaborate on this because I had the opportunity to experience these virtual reality glasses. As you can see in the first experience, it's the case of a person who has a physical disability. So you wear the glasses and you realize that you're missing an arm. So you're in a recruitment process. Your potential new boss says that everything looks excellent. The boss looks excited and like he wants to hire you, but then the boss realizes that I'm missing an arm. That was just a short excerpt from the video. No spoilers intended, but for you to understand it better, then we see how the person's reaction changes and he starts saying, well, but here we have to do many things, there's lots of writing involved, I don't know how you are going to manage. And it's not until someone else who had been involved in the recruitment process that had done a previous interview arrives and makes the other gentleman aware that it is a physical disability, but that doesn't affect his CV or his skills. So these few minute experiences are aimed at generating empathy and creating an attitude. In Barcelona, I could experience the 4 types of disability, and I don't know if it's because I'm really close to this subject, but it's something that it touches you, that really reaches you, like when you're experiencing visual impairment or other sorts of impairment. So these are some of the examples that we can see and that are not so far from us. Now we're going to talk about the method. This is the method that I will be following in the next years. The thesis will include 3 studies. The first one is a systematic review following the PRISMA methodology. Different databases will be used to search for information. Up until now, 4,000 studies have been found with these keywords like virtual reality, empathy, attitudes. So I will have to filter down, erase some studies to see what papers I will have to read to carry out my systematic study. The second one is the psychometric validation. The idea is to adapt and to validate a scale of attitudes towards people with disability in terms of non-discrimination, towards the non-discrimination of people with disabilities by Romeo and other authors from the University of Barcelona. We will carry out exploratory analysis of factorial confirmation, reliability, and Pearson's correlation. The next stage will be designing the intervention. We will have a pilot study with a control group and a group that will have an experience with virtual reality to see if there are any changes and what the differences are between both groups in terms of their attitudes towards people with disability. So, what is the work plan? The preliminary working plan, the tentative plan is that during the first year right now I'm in the first year, I will take care of the theoretical framework, the design of the project, and the PRISMA systematic review. During the second year, I will do the psychometric validation, and in year 3, I would carry out the virtual reality pilot study. I would do the data analysis, data validation. So this is still under process. And during the last year, I will gather the information and I will write my doctorate thesis. And I will have to defend my thesis. Contributions. The contributions of this project have been divided in 3 categories. We have the scientific contribution, the practical one, and the alignment with the 2130 European strategy. From a scientific perspective, there will be an empirical validation of virtual reality on the attitudes, the threefold attitudes, because we were saying that attitudes have 3 components. In the field of disability and in a labor context. The practical application is that these experiences will be able to be used in different types of interventions, in other projects that will raise awareness in practice on the inclusions of this collective. And finally, there's an alignment with the EU strategy because in this case the study is taking place in Spain, so this will be a contribution from our country to the EU's agenda. Well, this was my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Brigitte, for this presentation. You may sit if you want, or you can stand, whatever it's like preferable for you. Well, I'm now supposed to give some feedback, right, on the paper, but this is actually not on the paper. It's on your whole PhD project, which is immense, and it's well planned. You have a clear vision of what you need to do for the next 4 years, and I wish you all the best in that. It's going to be a lot of work, but let's start maybe with how you situated the relevance of your project. I think it's very, very well and very solidly planned, that you really show that what is the relevance of this project, showing that 1 in 4 people in European Union, which seems to be a very, very high number, is having some kind of Discapacidad. Now I'm struggling to translate into English. Disability, yes, yeah. The problem of listening to Spanish the whole day. I mean, it's very well planned, very well explained, and I like that very much, especially when I was wondering all the time, where is the definition of what actual disability is? Thank you for that. And then you came up also with a very well detailed definition of different kind of layers that there are. Frankly, I was quite surprised to realize that in Lithuania, in Latvia, actually, it's like in Latvia, it's like 42% of people with some kind of disabilities, which seems to be probably quite pertinent for you as some maybe kind of future case study. You presented well the plan, the work plan for the next 4 years, and that is well planned, also the scientific contributions. But when it comes to diving into the methodology, I find that it was not that clear. The relevance and the added value of using a virtual reality. You tried to explain this to us by showing us these 2 small videos and explaining the previous scientific knowledge on the use of this specific technology, but I don't think that it was very, very strongly emphasized in the presentation, especially in terms of what is the advantage of using this specific method, which is your method, using virtual reality technologies to kind of capture and measure the attitudes. When it comes to capturing and measuring the attitudes, I mean, this is not a criticism. This is just, preliminary diving into the topic of your doctoral thesis that you're going to develop. I can, to a certain extent, agree on this kind of binary approach to measuring attitudes as positive and negative. But then when you kind of operationalize that through the tables, which are very well detailed and really backed up with scientific studies, very recent studies as well, showing that this is a relevant and timely topic as well, then I could not really detect the difference between the outcomes. What are the outcomes and what is the impact? Because this is actually where I can situate your contribution, somewhere in between capturing the outcomes of this process and capturing actually the impact. So in terms of attitudes, you envisage somewhere in this table acceptance, so this is inclusion, or not acceptance, which is discrimination, but this is actually the outcome. So I would not say that this is an attitude, this is the result of those attitudes. So I think this needs to be a bit more streamlined into the, let's say, theoretical, methodological approach of your proposal, which is going to give you then the tools to measure the impact. And when it comes to measuring the impact, I think you brilliantly planned that because you have a 3-step model. So first is the meta-analysis. So I don't know why you use Prisma, because it's a meta-analysis. I mean, it's just, there are meta-analytical approaches that you can use which are not that time-consuming, so I don't think you may need a year to do this. But it's going to be, I think, very interesting for you because it's, differently from the literature review, it's going to give you a much broader and much deeper dive into what is actually there. But I think that you're on a very good path already because you're mastering a lot of scientific studies already on the topic. And then in the second step, you actually plan on using that meta-analytical approach to derive indicators, which is good. It's well planned, but it's not really clear how you are going to use those indicators for the next stage, for the empirical let's say, approach to your study. So this was a kind of like a missing a link for me, because maybe it's just my limitation, but I could not see how you're going to actually use those indicators, how you're going to isolate this correlation and causation mechanism that you're going to map out in the first place, and how you're going to use the virtual technology, actually virtual reality, to capture that. So in terms of, anticipated results, expected, results, it's still not quite clear for me, but I think it's also not clear for you because you still have to do the work. So again, I'm saying this is not a criticism, this is just a feedback, maybe to help you, streamline, your future 4 years of work and life as well, maybe in a more constructive way. So maybe a bit on that, because as we said, Brigitte is in the first year of her PhD research, so it's, I think, quite important to have a broad discussion about these topics and maybe some kind of reflection on how you plan on actually writing the chapter for this specific seminar. So do you have any idea, like, how would you go around it? Because you cannot bring everything. You cannot already talk about expected results. So what kind of contribution do you envisage by the end of this, let's say, fellowship or research project with Yuste? Thank you, Brigitte, once again, and congratulations.
Thank you as well. Thank you. Bueno, para responder...
Maybe I didn't make enough emphasis on the advantages of the use of virtual reality, as you said. But unlike classical interventions that I showed in my chart, virtual reality can use these three components because it operates on a cognitive level, on an emotional level, because when we are experiencing this, you feel something, and then you are expected to behave in a certain way. You are supposed to change your behavior by generating broader inclusion spaces in the labor world. Regarding the method, after carrying out the PRISM study or the systematic study, the validation of a scale of attitudes will be carried out. This scale has already been drafted by my thesis director. And with this scale, we aim at measuring the before and after the virtual reality study. Unlike other scales, what this scale measures is the different types of disabilities, because this could be done randomly. Maybe Raquel would have to assess visual impairment and Cristina would have to assess a physical disability. So this is a tool that will be used for measuring the before and after. The contribution that I have in mind for this doctoral seminar is to discuss a little bit the journey of disability and why people's attitudes in the labor world are changed to generate broader inclusion. And I was also thinking about giving some basic ideas with the studies I found on virtual reality and the generation of empathy in people with disability. It's not so much about presenting the methodology, but the theoretical framework that I am developing.
On empathy, because that part of the presentation, I mean, it was clear like that you can, there are previous studies that kind of try to capture that kind of empathy. Do you have any maybe example for us how previous studies have dealt with capturing the let's say the impact that different kind of tools or like virtual reality had on increase of empathy?
Sí, de hecho, creo que no se puede regresar a la presentación para la tabla, ¿verdad?
Yeah, there was one in museums, for instance.
No,
that was
para
also
verla.
an empathy,
Sí.
right? Yes.
Sí, por ejemplo, en este estudio, que bueno, ahora no recuerdo el autor, pero básicamente se utiliza, las personas con las que se trabajó fueron personas tanto con sin discapacidad, y con discapacidad. Entonces, el objetivo era que las personas sin discapacidad puedan ver, por ejemplo, cómo les costaba a alguna persona que venía de visita al museo con una silla de ruedas y cómo era difícil poder pedir en la recepción ayuda o algunos otros lugares también del museo que de repente no estaban adaptados. Y A las personas con discapacidad también estuvieron incluidas en este estudio para valorar si es que realmente la experiencia era similar a lo que se veía en las lentes de realidad virtual. Entonces, como conclusión, después de esta experiencia, los autores mencionan que hubo un mayor incremento de empatía y de estos cambios, en este caso con los trabajadores del museo.
Thank you, Brigitte. This looks like a very promising research work. We open now the floor for questions from the audience. Somebody from the jury? Somebody else, please. Do you have a microphone?
Hola Brigitte, lo primero.
Hello, Brigitte. Congratulations and good luck. You're just starting, so good luck with your thesis. I wanted to ask you something. In line with these awareness raising strategies to improve the attitudes towards people with disability, I am more familiar with more traditional strategies without using virtual reality. And I wanted to ask you something. What traditional strategies are used? For example, role playing, trying to put yourself in the shoes of someone with disabilities. For example, by simulating visual disability. Sometimes the person who is doing that is scared and the point of departure is not good. So what I wanted to ask you is whether you think you have considered that it is relevant to assess what these attitudes are, and if you want to compare the traditional methods with the virtual reality methods. For example, people who feel unsafe about walking along a museum without seeing anything. If I have a bandage in my eyes, I feel insecure, but maybe with virtual reality glasses, I feel more secure, and I am more likely to have positive attitudes towards people with disability. Thank you. This question, when I was putting this presentation together, I was talking to my thesis directors, and we were wondering something. Are we going to have a control group versus a group that uses virtual reality, or a group that is carrying out an intervention like the ones you mentioned, and we compare that to virtual reality? So it came to mind to do this, but we opted for a control group without any previous intervention. And we compare that to the group that is going to receive the virtual reality glasses. Actually, I found this very interesting because that could also measure if this intervention is functioning and up to what level, and in comparison with virtual reality. It's very interesting. I mean, I have 4 years ahead of me, so anything can happen. But anyways, thank you very much for your contribution.
Muchas gracias, compañera. Yo tengo una...
Thank you very much, colleague. I have a question. What do you think about the investment in digital literacy without making sure previously that everyone with disability, particularly people with intellectual disability, know how to read and write? That is, having this leap to virtual reality without previously knowing that the physical reality is controlled? This is indeed a very good question. The topic that I'm addressing is somewhat different to what you are sharing, because in this case, I am talking about the fact that this virtual reality is tested by people who do not have disabilities, or who may have some other sorts of disability that is physical, and they try these glasses to experience, for example, a visual impairment. There are studies where virtual reality is used with people with intellectual disability, people with autism, to help them in their therapy, and to help them overcome certain situations. And this can help improve certain skills. This can also happen, but the approach is somewhat different to the one you gave in your question. Brigitte, congratulations for the decisions you have made for your doctoral research. I think this is a very important stage to start grounding all your ambitions and putting limits to all our dreams, the dreams that we have when we are developing the thesis. I think everything you're saying is very interesting, but I have a question that is more like a recommendation. When it comes to the design, the interactive design, there is a branch that is called human-computer interaction. And I think it would be very interesting for you to explore this in terms of other types of devices that may promote this exercise of transformation beyond virtual reality glasses, transformation of attitudes before people with disabilities. This on the one hand. On the other hand, I think that it is important to wonder ethical aspects. Probably your research will have to go through an ethics committee, and you are going to have to think about that, because as Juan Manuel was saying, all research comes from a well-intended place, but there are things that we don't get to measure when it comes to the methodology. So I think as you move forward, you will have to go step by step, little by little, to check the potential ethical impact of your research. I think, the rest of the stuff that I had written down, the teachers already shared with you.
And yes, definitely, I think the ethical impact this research can have is important, especially the respect certain scenarios are presented, certain experiences lived by people with disabilities. And yes, one more thing, it's about the research perspective, where you address people without disabilities, but as you said in your presentation, you can also add the perspective of people with disabilities. It's a multiple and diverse perspective, so that needs to be stated in the research, because in my view it is a very comprehensive perspective of the phenomenon. With the ADECA Foundation, who work in Foro for the virtual reality goggles, they have already worked with people with disabilities and then formulated or generated the videos based on their experiences. But this is definitely something I need to take into account. Thank you, Paula. Ismail? Well, I want to echo with what my colleagues said in their congratulations, but I wanted to know whether you have found limitations in the videos you've used in the virtual reality. For instance, in the tourism field or in hospitality, there is some work with virtual reality, but how many people do really wear or own virtual reality goggles? Sometimes, there are some games or videos where you can see a hotel room, but have you seen any practical limitations in your work? Well, I am now falling in love with my dissertation, so I've only seen the positive sides of it. But I also understand that virtual reality is a very expensive tool. And not all companies can afford to even organize a training with virtual reality. So that is going to be a real limitation, because only that way, only few can benefit from this. This is not scalable because of the price, affordability, etc. But I haven't detected any more problems with it. Thank you, and good luck with your dissertation.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Brigitte, for your presentation. I'd like to make a comment because of doubt I have regarding the intended audience of your work. For the final outcomes, have you identified the target audience? It's not people with disabilities, people without disabilities. I think this product is also intended to increase the awareness and the empathy towards people with disabilities. It's maybe for people who might be hiring or working with people with disabilities. My second question is, my second remark is about the affordability. I don't think it will be a problem because there are some commercially available cardboard glasses with virtual reality, so I don't think that is a problem. But I think you should work on the target audience. It is also linked to the first part of your presentation, how many people are disabled and the link between employment and poverty, because I can see two clear target audiences. The first one is the companies, the employers, and the second one is the political sector, politicians that can create VR programs in the public sector so that this could be used systematically for many applications. If you study a degree where you are expected to create a business at the end of it, you can learn how to put yourself in the shoes of a person with disability thanks to these VR games or applications, and then bear that in mind when you have your own business. So this goes again beyond mere awareness raising. Thank you, Miguel, for your contribution. And since my background is psychology and business, I think this is more for businesses. Virtual reality can be used in training sessions for awareness-raising objectives, especially with human resources, with the human resources department, for the interviews, etc. In the political field, maybe that is a higher ambition, but it can be feasible, and it would be important, yes, for politicians or in general for lawmakers at a higher level. They can become aware of problems that sometimes we don't think about. So maybe I should define it better, or
well, I have a question as well, and maybe a comment. Well, the first question that kind of like just is like in the back of my mind now, sorry about my voice, is in which way actually would this study differ if it was made maybe in educational setting? So for instance, if you use the VR in schools, So what would be actually the difference, the added value of this kind of approach? And the second is, I mean, you can apply it basically everywhere then in this sense. And the second one is when you plan for the third year, when you plan to have this empirical study to recruit participants, and it seems that you have like already an idea how you're gonna work around this. Would it maybe have sense to work with hiring agencies and to actually have like first a pilot study with people who interview a large number of people, and then kind of like also do the baseline evaluation of how many people with disabilities actually go through the process, and they are then sent to different kind of companies and different kind of job profiles. I mean, maybe just an idea.
I love the idea. Gracias. De hecho,
yeah, thank you. So if I think about the possible educational applications, well, the difference is that we are dealing here with adult people, with adults. When we already expect them to have a job. But in the educational field, we could adapt the situations to raise awareness among teachers, because not all of them are ready to handle a student with disability, or even classmates. After or at a certain age, they could benefit from using these goggles. So that could be extrapolated, yes. And then regarding the headhunters, the headhunting agencies, it's a very good idea, and I think Fundación ADECO does the same. If someone with a disability is having a hard time finding a job, they work with the companies. They work around it with companies because they want to know whether it is a question of policy or well, they can work around that policy or they can overcome the policy. But sometimes, even if the person with a disability is hired, they are given less responsibilities, fewer responsibilities, because they don't trust them. So once a person is already working for a company, some awareness raising is needed.
Longitudinal study, so where you have a real baseline before before being hired, to entering the job market, to being in the job, you know?
Sí,
Might be
sí, es que
right?
de hecho hay mucho trabajo por hacer, es el pre, o sea, antes de.
Yeah, so we have to do work before the person is hired, and then during the onboarding, and once the talent is retained. Yes, so a lot of work to do.
Yo es que, bueno, primero darte las gracias.
I want to thank you and congratulate you because, well, the first year, or I mean, starting out a thesis is only for the bold. It is hard work. I'm already trying to finish my dissertation, so I all my solidarity. Your research is similar to mine because I also focus on the labor market or the work environment. And I also recommend you to read the literature on labor risk prevention, because there is much literature on it. I've attended conferences with people working on prevention, risk prevention, and with doctors. So you can use it to see the risks and benefits and difficulties of integrating this type of technology. I've got a list of references, and I can share it with you. You also need to take it into account when using this technology, because this kind of technology is also used to introduce these people with disability, I mean, to these kind of situations or scenarios, risk scenarios. And it is great to be able to see different perspectives in the first year of your dissertation, because it will help you. So congratulations again. Thank you for the contribution. The first year is about gathering the materials and
I would maybe like to ask Raquel and Cristina from their own perspectives and their own research which we heard this morning. How would you relate with this specific topic? Because this is a use of a specific technology. Would you find it useful maybe for some parts of your own research?
Bueno, yo quería preguntarle también.
I have a question, because virtual reality is very useful in many fields, as Miguel said, especially in the work environment. But I'd like to know about the content of those videos. It's, it is filmed or recorded. So it is based on the 4 types of disability, but how it is used to raise awareness or to change people's attitudes. There are many studies now in which artificial intelligence is helping out in the hiring process and the recruitment processes. So some technologies are now having a role in these processes, and this is a challenge in many cases, but I'd like to know how it can be used in a positive way. Regarding the experiences you see in the videos, those have been filmed with the clients of Fundación ADECO with some kind of disability, and they were used as an inspiration for the videos. It's really impactful, because when you wear the goggles, you feel like you have that disability yourself. You see you are missing a limb or an arm, or that you can't see, or that you have some kind of intellectual disability that you cannot understand something that is being explained. So it's really impactful, not just on a cognitive level, but also on an emotional level. So that's how the 3 components work together. Or how this we see this as a change maker. And regarding the use of artificial intelligence, well, the processes that use the recruitment or the hiring processes that use artificial intelligence are controversial, because they exclude you unless you use certain specific words. So we should use them more for inclusion rather than for exclusion, in a more positive way. Well, I was trying to link this, or to find a link between this and Anna's questions. I do think the artificial intelligence tools can be useful in some contexts, aside from yours. We work with an experience component, but I think it is an efficient way to expand it to other fields of work. And I'd like to suggest something to you, if you want to read it out. One of my colleagues have just read her dissertation about attitudes towards people with intellectual disabilities. One of the positive contributions she makes is something that is missing in your dissertation. She finished the thesis with a specific awareness-raising program or plan for similar to yours. You want to create like a program or a plan for companies, for businesses. And that plan was devised by her together with people with disabilities. So they organized talks on intellectual disabilities, etc. And that is important because it highlights how those people can organize interactive talks in which they emphasize their abilities, the abilities of those people without disabilities. The abilities of those people with disabilities. And it is very, very impactful because that way you can put yourself in the shoes of people with disabilities. Yes, but you can also do some training together with it. You can also organize side talks with companies, with businesses, so that the workers, the employees can interact directly with people with disabilities. It would be like a personal experience with people with disabilities. Thank you. This is something I wondered myself, if that virtual reality experience by itself will be helpful, or if we should organize like a dialogue with the person after living that experience, because psychometrically with the attitude scale might be okay, but we can do something else, an awareness raising training or some interaction, or what they realized after going through that experience. So yes, I can.
Yeah, maybe one last comment. I was just like thinking out loud now. In terms of when you finalize your idea on how to use the VR, did you consider this VR experience to be more of a simulation, or maybe you think maybe you can find some kind of synergies with the gaming theories as well, which is like like it's a very well developed field, for using the VR. So do you think maybe in that direction, and maybe it's just like too far away? So to be maybe more specific, how do you see the VR experience that you're trying to create? Do you see it as a stimulation or an emulation of an actual experience?
Buena pregunta. De hecho,
that is a good question. It's immersive reality. And the way we've seen it, or the way we've devised it as of now, is that we give the video or the scenario to the person. It is a setup. It is a scripted scenario. It's like they don't need to do anything. They don't need to click or do anything. It's not a gamification experience. It's a scripted experience. But that's a very good question, because maybe we can do something. We can do it differently. Maybe we could create different videos, and we could change the video. We can change the scenario based on the people's actions or the people's choices.
Took over managing of the panel from Miguel. So if there are any other questions, Miguel, word to you then.
Thank you, Ana. And well, no more questions. So we still have one presentation more to go. We can have like a 3 minutes break just to rest a little bit, but before we give a big clap to Brigitte. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.